Hello, I'm Martin Webber. Confused drivers who find themselves breaking bus lane rules in the middle of Tunbridge Wells have now paid fines totalling more than £1 million. Local residents are also affected, and I'm joined by one of those residents now, Sally Atkinson. Sally, thanks for joining us. So, Sally, what do you make of the success of this scheme?
I think it's been very successful for the Tunbridge Wells Borough Council coffers. I think it's been remarkably unsuccessful for any of the residents on the feeder roads, the businesses on Monson Road, and for a lot of drivers that inadvertently go through the bus gate without realising they've done so.
So, were you consulted about the scheme before it was implemented?
No, I had a business on Newton Road from 2005 and I've lived on Dudley Road since 2014. At neither address did I receive any prior warning. The only information I received was when the council were deciding to actually undertake the work, and it was to advise us of when that work was due to start, its anticipated conclusion date and the interference to traffic flows during that process.
So the council says that the point of this scheme is to reduce the amount of traffic in the centre of Tunbridge Wells, to improve the air quality and make the quality of life better for residents in Tunbridge Wells. Don't they have a point?
Well, they definitely have failed on all 3 points. The first point is they wanted to make a pedestrianised town square. They knew early into the planning stage that that could not be achieved because the bus routes still continue to go through the centre of town, and they have opened it to taxis and cycles, but nothing motorised between the hours of 9 and 6. Insofar as traffic pollution environmentally is concerned, I have no idea whether or not they have or haven't reduced it, because there are no pollutant monitors before, during or since implementation. They can only go on the fact that there are now a falling number of fines. But for the residents now are forced to undertake a 3/4 to a mile extra loop in order to secure parking in their parking permit streets.
So you live in the road we're standing in
Yes.
at the moment, in Dudley Road, and I can see behind you is the Opera House, and any cars coming down here, either residents or people making their way through the town, they have to turn right at the end of the road. But at that point, dangers lurk for a driver, don't they?
They do. At the end of Dudley Road, you have pedestrians crossing in both directions. As a driver, you're having to exit Dudley Road to the right, which is obvious, both from the way the road is laid out and the fact there is a no left turn sign. You negotiate 2 pathways of traffic in each direction because the buses and taxis are still coming that way in both directions. Having exited right, you come across another pedestrian crossing point within 20 yards, and then 20 yards after that, the start of the traffic restriction starts. I would like to say that actually at no point on the entrance or exit of Dudley Road is there any signage whatsoever to indicate that you are about to enter this traffic restricted zone. And as a driver, you will be focused on both the traffic that you're crossing, the pedestrians that are crossing in all directions, cyclists that may be lurking around every corner, and then before you know it, you're in the traffic restricted zone and you didn't even know you were there.
So we know that the number of fines that have been imposed so far is roughly equivalent to the number of drivers in the whole borough of Tunbridge Wells. Do you think, given this evidence that people are confused, the council, even if it was good intentions at the beginning, should have acted by now to pause the scheme and rethink?
I do. There are 2 aspects to that. The first is I opened a petition that received more than its prerequisite 1,000 signatures in 2 rather than the 3 months that the petition ran for. The council did not debate it at the next meeting, which they ought to have done. They eventually debated it with that additional 3 months delay, and they didn't debate the points of the petition, which were to stop the scheme and refund the fines thus far. The second reason I think it ought to have been paused is because the number of tickets that have been issued is far in excess of what any reasonable person would deem the result of a successful traffic scheme. They should have paused it, and they should have gone round and worked out what is the confusion. Why are so many drivers being picked up on this stretch of road?
Well, there's no sign of the scheme being paused because £1.5 million of revenue is quite useful for a council. I think it only gets in about 7 million in council tax revenue. It's obviously not going to stop taking the revenue in. It does say that the number of fines has gone down quite a lot since the initial phase. But let's move on. What exactly would you like to see happen? What is your ideal configuration of these roads to stop the confusion and yet, keep the amount of pollution down in the town centre?
I have suggested that traffic exiting London Road, the A26, is only allowed to come down York Road towards the town centre. At the exit of York Road, the traffic must turn left, albeit on Mount Pleasant for a short distance, but they're actually allowed to do that now. But instead of traversing Mount Pleasant, which is more dangerous, they will be turning left and staying on one side of the road. Having turned left at the exit of York Road onto Mount Pleasant, traffic will enter Dudley Road from the Opera House up towards where we are and exit onto London Road. So it creates a short, exclusive loop, if you like, for the residents who are trying to seek parking, while still actually trying to give the sacrosanct primacy of Mount Pleasant. It will be safer for pedestrians because traffic will not be allowed to exit from York Road onto Monson Road. So the crossing point that's been rendered extremely dangerous at the exit of Monson Road onto Mount Pleasant will be not utilised by anybody coming off the A26 as it is now. So that will make their pedestrian safety much better. It will keep the west and east sides of Mount Pleasant completely exclusive to each other, which again will encourage the primacy of Mount Pleasant, which seems to be the most important thing for this council. I'd just like to backtrack and say the fines and the revenue they've earned is, 1.2 million in November, and it's upwards of that now. I don't know what the figures are now because I haven't done an FOI recently. However, that is ring-fenced. It's a ring-fenced income that can only be used for active transport and for highways improvements in respect of active transport, etc. So they will be able to improve bus routes, for example. They won't be able to fill potholes.
So how would you sum up the mood of residents in this area?
I would say absolutely fed up and frustrated because we have been talking about this now for 15 months and absolutely nothing other than sitting on a lot of hands and a lot of vacuous words have been spoken. We get a lot of well-meaning nodding in agreement discussions with various councillors and nothing happens. Meanwhile, the residents of these streets spend an hour of their lives every day doing an unnecessary journey around town through 2 sets of traffic lights, in fact 3 sets of traffic lights and a roundabout in order to procure parking outside their home, which they've paid for.
And that's because of the fact that once you get to the end of the road, you've got to do this massive loop to have another look for a space.
Yes.
Sally Atkinson, resident of Dudley Road, thank you very much indeed.